Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 5 Drinks to Midnight. You know, the show where we bring the questions, guests bring the drinks, so we try to wrap up before midnight. Today we're headed to Quarter Bar here in Brooklyn to talk to the owner, cocktail veteran, David Moo. But before we do, like and subscribe. It will really help us out. Let's get started. So much for having us. 5 Drinks at Midnight, 5 drinks, 5 questions.
Right.
Thank you for having us at Quarter Bar. Thank you so much. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing all right. Welcome to the bar.
Excellent. This is amazing. Congratulations on about turn 15. So that's amazing.
I have some party planning to do in the next month.
There you go. What are we drinking?
This is a sea shandy. It's like a little, well, not little. It's quite large actually, but it's a refreshment that I came up with some years ago. It's a shandy,
Okay.
except instead of using lemonade in the classic sort of British sense of the word shandy, it uses Cel-Ray Soda. So it's like a super New York thing in a sense. It's Dr. Brown's Cel-Ray Soda.
Okay.
A touch of lime juice, lager, in this case a Pilsner, and a salt rim. So the idea is that it's supposed to give you these kinds of like oceanic tastes or whatever, but it's just a shandy refreshment.
Okay.
I thought it was a good way to start a Sunday afternoon.
Sounds perfect. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you. Okay. Interesting. Okay, celery soda.
Celery soda and beer. Yeah.
All right. Well,
It's a little bit like having like a. It's a little bit like a Bloody Mary, but without all of the weight.
yeah.
You know,
Or the snacks.
or the snacks.
But you get the salt. All right. Well, question one, jumping right into it then. I mean, like you said, you've been a cocktail bartender for over 20 years.
25 years.
And then 15 years here. I guess, big question, how'd you get started into the bar business or in the spirits world, if you will?
Oh, well, that's an even longer story. I came to New York in the early 90s in December of 1993 to make theater, like thousands of others like me. And I did that for a long time, but you got to support yourself somehow. So yeah, we won't get into that. That's not what we're here for, but in order to support myself as a theater maker in various capacities, you can kind of, back then the idea was that you could go in 2 tracks. You could either become a paralegal or you could work in service. And if you worked in service, well, not everybody, but I think a lot of people sort of would start working in service and would look and be like, that's what I want to do eventually. Like, I want to work my way in some way or another, by hook or by crook, in my case by crook, to be behind the bar instead of waiting on tables.
All right.
And
Excellent.
that's how I became a bartender. So yeah, from 1994 until 1997 or whatever, I waited tables.
Okay.
And then eventually in 1997, I lied my way behind the bar.
Okay. And then how then becoming owner, operator of Quarter, like how did that happen?
Now we're jumping ahead many years. In 2000, well, from 2004 to 2007, I worked at a kind of beloved beer and shop, kind of divey art bar in a way, I guess, called Last Exit on Atlantic Avenue, which I'm sure some people watching will remember, if you're Brooklyn people at all. Yeah, it was sort of a beloved neighborhood spot with like famously graffitied bathrooms and kind of like, whatever. I won't get into describing the exit, but anyway, that bar. It was one of the first what we would call like Manhattan transplant bars.
Okay.
It opened in 1998, I think, on Atlantic Avenue between Clinton and Henry. And it was like the gate opened up here on Fifth Avenue around that same time, I think, that same year. And these two bars, as far as this region of Brooklyn goes, that's Park Slope, and over there is on the border between Cobble Hill and Brooklyn Heights. They kind of were places for people who 10 years before that, or 5 years before that, let's say, would have gone out. And indeed, even in 1997, 98, where most of the people in those neighborhoods were still getting on the train and going to Manhattan, these were bars that were set up for those people to kind of make the choice to stay in Brooklyn. Because there were no other bars that kind of catered to a kind of East Village or Lower East Side crowd at that time around here. So my now business partner was one of the owners of that bar. So he and his partners, they opened Last Exit in 1998. And I started working there in 2004. And in the meantime, I had sort of steered myself into an interest in cocktails as opposed to just sort of the general craft of bartending, which I was and still am deeply interested in, the general craft of bartending. But I also had gained a particular interest in cocktails, and I was talking to Joe Herron one night. Joe Herron is the name of my business partner, and at that time my boss. And he was there hanging out, and he said that he had acquired a space on Fifth Avenue, and I don't think he told me exactly where because he's super cagey as a person. And so he's just like, yeah, I've acquired a space on Fifth Avenue in Brooklyn. And I was like, oh, I mean, we were talking about, there was a liquor store at the time called Linnell's, very kind of well-known weirdo liquor store in Red Hook. And we were talking about our recent visits separately to Linnell's. And I was talking about her. I was like, she has the largest collection of bitters that I've ever seen ever, right? And now I've seen larger collections of bitters, but at that point it was like, this is crazy. She sells like 17 different kinds of bitters. And Joe was like, I'm interested maybe in having a place that like is maybe a little bit more cocktail forward. He did not put it that way. He would never use those words, but that was the idea. And I said I would be interested in being involved in a place that was a little bit more about cocktails. And that was the beginning of us becoming partners.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and then 15 years later, you're still standing. So, I mean, that's
Here we are.
pretty fucking amazing. Yeah. So, all right, well, I mean, that's question one. Our origin story's nailed down. So, came to be an actor, and now you're a barman.
I'm a barman, yeah, exactly. I mean, like lots of things, you don't plan the course of your life.
Yeah.
It's, you are somewhat in control, and it is somewhat in control of you. You know, people who seem to be victims of the course of their own lives, I feel are not understanding that they have agency. But anybody who thinks that they totally have agency are totally fooling themselves. So here we are.
There we go. Well, cheers.
Cheers again.
All right.
All right.
Question 2, drink 2.
Yeah.
What are we drinking?
This is something called the tomato drink. Speaking of things that aren't a Bloody Mary.
Okay.
People ask at the bar all the time when they look at this on the menu, does that taste like a Bloody Mary? It's like, no, it doesn't taste anything in any way like a Bloody Mary. It tastes less like a Bloody Mary than the drink that we just had, the sea Shandy, which actually does somewhat kind of resemble in some ways a shadow of a Bloody Mary. This tastes like sitting in a garden in the summer and biting into a tomato, as you will see. And that's the story. So yeah, it's a fresh tomato, muddled, one for each drink, with some other stuff going on. There's some mezcal and some tequila and some lemon. But honestly, those things all disappear underneath the flavor of, well, you'll see in a second, under this kind of like fresh tart tomato flavor.
Okay. Awesome. Cheers.
You know what it's based on? It's based on biting into a tomato sandwich.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. That is so good.
Cheers.
That is, I'm digging that. It's fucking good.
Cheers. Yeah.
You're right. You don't really get the tomato until the end, but like that's really fucking good.
Yeah, like Wonder Bread, tomato, mayonnaise, salt, pepper.
Yeah.
Full stop. That's it.
That's it, yeah.
That's kind of what that tastes like in a cocktail.
I'm down for that. That is fucking delicious. All right.
Cheers.
All right, well then, question 2, drink 2. From our research, social stalking, found out that you were a VO actor
That's true.
You did a lot of, but like super nerdy. Like you did a lot of like anime and like after school cartoon kind of stuff from like Yu-Gi-Oh and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like that's fucking awesome. Question 2: has anybody ever recognized your voice from behind the bar?
No.
No. Do they even know? Like
some people know that I'm a voice actor.
Yeah.
I still work sometimes, so like some people know that. Like customers who've known me for a long time. But no one's ever been sitting here and said, "Wait a second, are you the voice of Panic from Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 4? You know, or whatever."
Yeah.
No, that's never happened.
Wikipedia page like immediately comes up, and like it was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles like is immediately there, and like number 2, you're like on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles like info like character breakdown. You were all over the place, and I was like, that's fucking awesome.
I did thousands of these things, and so over the course, I mean, I made like a third of my living for years, from like the late '90s until the early 2000s. I mean, it's maybe a comment on what my living was at that time, but indeed, I made a significant portion of my income, making anime, not just. Technically, I guess not just anime, but doing dubs, English language dubs of Japanese television shows, almost all of which, 99% of which were cartoons and therefore anime, but some of which were live action.
Okay.
There's also something called Ultraman Tiga, which was on the Fox Box for a while. I was on a few shows that were on Fox Saturday morning cartoon lineup, and one of those was a live action show, kind of riding on the coattails of like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers kind of thing, called Ultraman Tiga, using the classic Japanese Ultraman character, but in this case, he's part of a world protecting security team, and I played the team leader. Or I played the voice of the English language dub of the team leader.
Absolutely. Well, in that case, if this drink were to have a voice, what would this drink's voice over be?
I mean, I'm not sure. Really, like give voice to this drink. I feel like the drink
speaks for itself.
Speaks for itself.
All right. Question 3, drink 3.
Here we are. This is something called a Viceroy.
Okay.
It is a gin and curry drink that I came up with, which is surprising to most people, but there you go. It's the idea is like England and India. Let's leave the politics of that at that.
Sure.
And there you go.
Awesome. Cheers.
Cheers.
That's good too. Oh.
Yeah.
That is. I'll get one there.
I'm glad you like it.
Mm.
Yeah, it's like a gimlet with curry.
Yeah, no, I mean, the curry is just, it's amazing. Like that. I'm digging that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fucking delicious. All right. All right. So question 3. I mean, we're just kind of getting to know each other, but I know it's kind of a lame question, but it's one of my favorites. Living or dead, if anybody came walking into the bar, who would it be? What would you serve them? And why them?
Oh my God. Wow. I wish I had some preparation for this question. Living or dead, if somebody walked into the bar and I could choose who it was, what would I serve them? Oh man, I'm really having trouble with that question. There are so many people that I would love to have an interaction with, which I mean, having nothing to do with wanting to serve them anything, but just because I would be super interested in having an interaction with some certain people. I don't know. I think that I'll tell you this. I have an ongoing. I don't know. I'm about to say something on camera that I don't think I've ever said to anybody. I have an ongoing fantasy, like a little, like decades long little fantasy of what it would be like to introduce. I mean, there have been films along these lines. I guess like Kate and Leopold was a movie that kind of like covers this. But I have this like ongoing fantasy of what it would be like to introduce like some genius of days gone by to modernity, and what it would be like to what kind of reaction they would have. I mean, some people have fantasies about what it would be like to show the founding fathers of the United States what their experiment had turned into, for instance. That's not my fantasy, although that's interesting. But no, I have more. I think more along the lines of like, what would it be like to introduce Mozart to my record collection? That's the kind of fantasy that I have. Like, what would it be like to what would Wolfgang Mozart think about Funkadelic? That's an important question to me. It's like, holy shit, would he immediately recognize that this is also genius on a level that is, that deserves the kind of analysis of his level of genius? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question to me. It's just to see what kind of reactions. And then, of course, there's all the sort of like workaday things of like, smartphones or whatever. Those are all interesting questions. But I'm more interested in like, how would people of certain types of genius, in the sense of having an incredible creative hold on a particular thing in human culture, to see how they would react to things that had developed since their time. These are questions that really fascinate me. So, I mean, as far as like idle fantasies go, these are idle fantasies that fascinate me. That's the best answer I can give you. Is that I don't know, like, there's all kinds of people that I would love to have some kind of interaction with.
So you almost want like the Bill and Ted moment of like when they're in the mall and like everybody's going crazy and being introduced to like all new things. Like you got a Genghis Khan and the baseball bat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's all kinds of things like how, like, what would, how would Satchel Paige react to the new pitch calling mechanism? I mean, like, there's all kinds of things that are fascinating to me. It's like, is interesting.
Right.
How do people react? How would historical figures react to seeing how, like, what their influence had wrought in the future? I find that interesting.
All right. And then what would you and Mozart be drinking?
Well, that's another question. Leads you to another question.
Yeah.
I mean, what did Mozart drink? Mozart drank, German wine, I think, mostly, Austrian, wine and whatever. I think that was what was available at the time to him for somebody of his, level in society. But that's another question. Like, what would Mozart actually be into if he were, obviously, like, there's day one, and then there's day, 300. And that's the question. It's like, on day one, what do you serve Mozart to drink? You give him something that he can manage.
Yeah.
What do you serve him on day 300 after he's been here in 2022 for 300 days? I mean, then it's not, I'm not going to give him a glass of Gruner Veltliner. Then we might be into some hard shit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it might not just be drinks either.
Yeah.
I mean, Mozart is probably, he's probably blowing lines of cocaine off of some bar somewhere, totally out of my control. It's sort of like, holy shit. Like, that's the,
He's like, hang on, I'll be back in the bathroom.
Yeah, exactly.
Comes back and writes a new symphony.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Or the most mind-blowing, Chemical Brothers hip-hop beat that you've ever heard, crazy, that's the point. That's actually the point, is how does he redigest modernity? And that would include all of this.
Yeah.
It's
that went nowhere where I thought it would go, but I think that's fucking awesome, which is exactly why we asked the question. So I think it's fucking awesome. So cheers to that.
Cheers.
So,
Well, here we go.
question 4, drink 4. What are we drinking?
This is something called Cutter's Punch.
Okay.
Which is something I came up with, but I've got to give it the caveat that it's something I came up with as a retro engineering of something that I had on vacation.
Okay.
So, some years ago, in celebration of my father's 80th birthday, so it must have been in 2016. So like in 2015 he turned 80, and in 2016 we went on a family trip.
Very
In
nice.
celebration of my father's 80th birthday. We went to Barbados.
Okay.
And my father's from Jamaica.
Okay.
And so we went to Barbados because we were trying to take him to a place that would, in 2016, be as much like the Jamaica that he had grown up with in the 30s and 40s. Jamaica itself is not that much like that, but Barbados is a little bit more like that. So we took him to Barbados, and we drank a variety of rum punches while we were there, because rum punch is a obligatory standard in Barbados, in the West Indies in general, but Barbados particularly. They consider themselves to be the home of rum, where rum was invented, and so the rum punch is kind of their national drink.
Okay.
And so wherever you go on various tours or visits or whatever around, people serve you rum punch. It's always on the menu. It's different in different places. There are certain similarities to it, but on the very last day that we were there, my family left, which was a massive blessing, which left me and my wife alone in our house.
Gotcha.
We had rented this house for the 6 of us or whatever, and they left, leaving just the 2 of us in this house and a day to ourselves to like do what we wanted. And we went to a restaurant that we had been curious about, that we had not gone to with my family, called Cutter's. A cutter in Barbados is a name for a kind of sandwich.
Okay.
There's a sandwich that they love in Barbados called a cutter. But there's this restaurant called Cutter's, and we had been curious about it, and we walked in and we had the sandwiches that are involved in their name and whatever, but we also ordered the rum punch. And that was by far the best rum punch that we had in the entire time that we were there. And I was super taken with it. And it turned out they sold this rum punch as a bottled cocktail that you could buy and take away. I did not buy it, but I did walk up to their rack of bottles and look at the ingredients and kind of cadge what was generally in it.
Okay.
And then put it in my little file
Yeah.
of things. And a couple months later, I was making some experiments, and I tried to recreate the flavor of that using what was basically listed on those, but that was not right.
Okay.
And with a few more experiments, I figured out a couple things that seemed like it brought it closer to that flavor, and this is what I came up with.
Awesome.
That's what we're drinking.
Cheers.
Cheers. Feel free to discard her.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Can't go wrong with that. That's fucking
You know,
delicious.
it's classic tea. It's a nutmeg, clove, rum,
Yeah. Sold.
a whisper of pineapple, Angostura bitters.
Done.
That's it.
Yeah. All right. So then, question 4: worst and best trend in bartending.
I mean, sure. I have a lot of bête noire, regarding various trends that have happened in the 25 years I've been making drinks for people. They're not what you would expect necessarily. You go into bars and somebody asks for a mojito, and bartender's just like, whatever. And in like a beer in a shop bar, I understand that complaint, because they're like being asked to not only make a cocktail, but they're being asked to make a cocktail that involves a number of steps or whatever. I find it more curious when I go to like a cocktail bar And people are already making 7 and 8 touch cocktails, and somebody orders a mojito, and there's this like cultural momentum that makes the bartender be like, oh, you know, like whatever, I gotta go fucking make it. It's like, dude, you're already making 7 touch cocktails. What's the big deal? It's not a, you know, like whatever. None of that bothers me. So it's not a matter of the difficulty of a drink in general, although there's a couple things where I roll my eyes because things are hard. But in a way, I have a certain respect for that. It's like, oh, well, you know what that is, and you know that I'm somebody who might be able to make that for you. So I have a moment. Let me go ahead and make that for you. That would refer to something like a Rainbow's Ginger.
Yeah, so I was gonna say like
that or whatever. But none of that is those aren't the problems. The problems are when I find a cocktail to be like basically. So of course there's the classic, in the cocktail revival, both cocktail bartenders and cocktail geeks rediscovered a classic called Blood and Sand, and cocktail bartenders immediately came to understand that this drink is a classic that they have to know, but that it's also disgusting. And cocktail geeks came to understand that this is a classic that I have to know, and therefore I'm going to ask cocktail bartenders to make it for me. And there's a disconnect there between those who actually construct the things and the people who consume them. Like, why would you want this drink? This drink is horrible. It was never good to begin with. I mean, yes, I can tinker with it, change the proportions, change out the scotch, make it a little bit more acceptable, but it's, it's putting lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
So, so there's that kind of thing of like people who are trying to revive, like cocktail geeks trying to revive things just for the sake of revival with a little bit of stump the bartender kind of involved in that. But then there's other things, and these aren't the things that make me most annoyed. The things that make me most annoyed are things where people just, with no knowledge of the sort of reality of things or any eye towards the kind of bar they're in, become sort of the creatures of various trends. The best example of that would be like the skinny margarita. There's no such thing, I'm sorry, I'm going to turn to the camera. There's no such thing as a skinny margarita. It doesn't exist. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
It's created by somebody like Skinny Girl Tequila creating something, putting it into people's heads that they're, what they mean when they ask for that is they want a margarita that's not too sweet, which is an insult to the bartender, because if you've walked into a cocktail bar, like a proper cocktail bar, and if you don't know whether or not you're in a proper cocktail bar, then it's kind of on you to figure out the sort of
decor
kind of world that you are in.
Yeah.
And I get it. If you've walked into a beer in a shop bar and you've asked for a margarita and they're using Rose's lime juice or something, then you're going to get a margarita that's not great. But you should also know, and to be clear, I'm all for walking into beer and shop bars. I walk into beer and shop bars on a regular basis. But I know what I'm in for, and I know therefore what I should order. These are things that I enjoy. I like having a beer. I like having a shot. I like having a, like something on the rocks with a beer like that. Like that's fine for me.
Time and place where
time and place. I know that I probably shouldn't order the red wine at a dive bar because it's probably been
open.
A, it's probably terrible, and B, it's probably from last week.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, these are just things that like, just as a consumer, you should probably have figured out. But when you have walked into something that is clearly a cocktail bar, to make sort of like refinements on the kind of margarita you would like in that way is offensive to us, because it's like, no, our margarita is not too sweet and does not involve any. I mean, anyway.
Yeah.
So I think your viewers are going to understand what we're talking about.
Yes.
So there you go. Those are the kinds of things that I find annoying. None of the other things that people are like some of my colleagues are really annoyed by certain current trends. There's definitely like a resurgence of espresso martini this year. I'm sure you, Tim, have been hearing about that.
Yes.
I'm not sure why 2022 is the year, and it really is 2022. It's not 2021. I was making espresso martinis last Christmas.
Yeah.
But starting in sometime in January, and I don't know what has happened, this is a thing right now. And some of my, brothers and sisters are really pissed off about it. I'm not exactly sure why. For me, it's like, okay, well, if you have the ingredients, which not every bar does,
right?
But if you have the ingredients on hand, what's the problem?
Right.
I basically don't have a problem with making things for people that I have the ingredients for, as long as I don't think that they're terrible, or as long as I don't think that you. And I guess that's part of the point. Is like some of the people that I know think that the espresso martini is de facto terrible, but I don't actually think it is. I think properly made, it's, I can see moments where I might like a strong coffee drink to give me some snap at 11 o'clock at night.
Yep.
Sure. I have no problem with that. The things that I find annoying are things where you are trying to modify stuff that doesn't require modification, or where you have no idea what you're actually ordering. Those are the things that I find most annoying. Anyway, as far as, I'm sorry, what's the question again?
So that's your annoying. And then what's the one trend that you really do like?
Oh, well, I'll say this as far as that goes, is that let's just talk about the cocktail revival in general. In 1999, you would be ill-advised to walk into an average, even kind of like nice bar, let's say a hotel lobby bar in, say, Memphis, and be sure that you were going to get a properly made, super standard fill-in-the-blank cocktail, say like a Manhattan or a sidecar or something like that. Indeed, you could walk into the nicest hotel in town and ask for a sidecar and still get sour mix on the gun. Okay, so I think that, let's put it this way, Dave Wondrich, our common sort of historian, right? The official historian of our business. He said this years ago. He said, the ultimate goal of the cocktail revival will be when I can walk into a bar anywhere in the United States, and when I can walk into a moderate quality bar anywhere in the United States and order and I don't remember what cocktail he put in, but it's something like a Manhattan or whatever it is, and know that what I'm going to receive is going to be an absolutely workmanlike, totally drinkable, completely fine cocktail, as opposed to some of the things that I've had to suffer through in the past. And so that's the trend that I mean, as far as cocktails go, that's the trend that I am most approving of, is that the cocktail revival, with all of its faults and 19th century mustachioed, arm gartered, sort of blips in the scene of it all and whatever. The thing that it has, in fact, not quite completed the production of, but that it has almost, that it's certainly extended the production of, is a cultural development of people who stand behind bars knowing how to do things that we kind of classically think they're supposed to know how to do, make at least this 25 to 50 piece list of classic cocktails that they should be familiar with, and be able to make them in a way that is fun.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that we're almost getting there? Because I mean, again, it seems like even before the pandemic, there were people that were moving to Denver, bartenders were moving to Denver because Denver was going to be the new hotspot. Tennessee seems to be the new hotspot for cocktail revival. Sure. And it just seems to be it used to be New York bartenders would jump to LA
Or
bartenders.
San Francisco.
We would jump coast.
Yeah.
And now it seems like people are jumping back to Middle America.
Yeah, man.
And then spreading it out. And
I think that's true. I mean, I think that I don't know that we're there exactly. You know, I don't want to start name checking towns in the Southwest that I've never been to. You know what I mean? Like, but because I have no idea whether or not you can find a Boulevardier in you know, wherever. And also, I mean, I say Boulevardier just partly to be cheeky. Like, that's not actually one of the things that I think people are supposed to know how to make necessarily. But, or where I might feel comfortable ordering a martini or whatever, like something that they should be able to handle.
Yeah. Or your favorite drink, the Manhattan.
Or their Manhattan, my favorite drink. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know that we're there yet. But what I do know is that we're a lot closer to being there than we were 25 years ago. Yeah, I mean, 25 years ago, I had a regular in my first bartending job who told me the horror story of walking into a bar in France and asking for a martini and then receiving, martini and Rossi vermouth on the rocks with a lemon twist. Now, this is a story that's been rehearsed back to me over and over again by various people, including people who've had this happen to them in the last 5 years.
Sure.
But the fact is that although it still will happen to you if you go into some, like the Plaza Cafe in some small town in Provence or whatever, the fact is if you walk into a cocktail bar in a major French city in 2022 and you ask for a martini, you're going to get a fucking martini. The question is only going to be, do you want olives or a twist?
Right.
So like...
gin or vodka.
Maybe the last two gin or vodka. Sure. But yeah, I think that the cocktail revival has had an enormous effect on people knowing what cocktails are. Hence the name.
Yeah.
That cultural, that tiny. I mean, what we should be clear. Cocktail bartenders self-importantly talk about the massive blossoming of cocktail culture, but we're still just talking about like a tiny blip on the corner of what is actually a much larger culinary development in the United States in the last 40 years, which is like Americans are interested in food and where food comes from and how it's made and the specifics of what is possible and whatever, and that has finally trickled into the cocktail world. And indeed, some aspects of it may have been ushered by the cocktail world. I don't think that, whatever. We do bear some credit, I guess. We do deserve some credit for having engaged with the food, the larger food world and creating this blossoming of an interest in flavor and quality. There's the downside to that also, which is that like it's all a little bit precious. So, whatever.
No,
it's just a fucking.
When we interviewed Ethan Sugar, he was just like, "I'm not fucking saving lives. I'm just making cocktails."
Yeah, it's just cocktails.
He's just like, all right. So, drink 5, question 5. What do we drink?
I thought I would stop assaulting you with the cocktails. I mean, it's always good to. I always feel like it's a good idea to like ease somebody into an experience, and always to kind of like let them ease themselves out of an experience. That said, it involves a shot, but it's a low-proof shot. So, what are we having? We're having Kustritzer Black, which is one of my favorite beers in the world. I love black lager. I'm a big fan of black lager. Black lagers, if you don't know what they are they're lagers made by Pilsner makers in general. Yeah. That's the general idea about them. And they have the mouthfeel and the effect in your sort of just like the structure of your palate of Pilsner.
Okay.
But they have the flavor of stout.
Okay.
And so I love them for that. It's like they're malty, they're a little bit sweet, they have those like chocolate and coffee flavors of the stout, and that maltiness of the stout, but they are super light, like really, really light in the palate. And what's in the shot glass? The shot glass contains Braulio, which is an Italian Amaro, super piney. Not like, pine tree, air freshener piney, but like piney in a more like, it's a little bit Christmas, but not like Becherovka Christmas, like a different kind of Christmas. Anyway, but with that sort of like a Verna flavor to it as well.
Well, cheers.
There you go. Cheers.
So do we sip and...
I think we should sip, shoot, and then sip.
Okay. Changed everything.
Yeah.
Just made it like cola almost. All right.
A little bit. Yeah.
All right.
I love that.
Very nice. All right. Question 5. This question came to me last night. I know how much you love Manhattans. It's your drink of choice. Like you are like the Manhattan expert. Everybody all the interviews that I've socially stalked, researched you on is that you love Manhattans.
Yeah,
and last night, I was drinking Manhattans last night and had a wonderful conversation with a gentleman about my Manhattan. And I thought you would be the perfect person to ask. So, question 5 comes down to Whiskey Wednesday coin. You can flip it, you can spin it, you can do whatever you want, but the coin will give us the answer.
Okay.
Coin don't lie. Just like fouls and ball don't lie in basketball, coin don't lie. So, question 5. Does glassware have genitalia?
What's the origin of the question?
So, I was at a bar last night watching my Nets lose.
Discernibly no, but anyway.
Was at a bar last night, watched my Nets lose. Was drinking Manhattans. Gentleman next to me asked me to put my Manhattan into a manly glass because they served it to me in a girly glass. And so therefore...
The girly glass that it comes in.
Yeah, the coupe. The coupe. And maybe he doesn't know the history. And again, I know it's not true, but like the coupe is, named after or shaped after Marie Antoinette's breasts.
It's total bullshit.
Total bullshit. Yes, absolutely total bullshit. I know it's not true, but and so he was like, we should put it in a manly glass, and I was like,
well, what's up with him policing your masculinity?
Exactly. Like he felt that, because I wasn't drinking.
Also, just I don't know. Whatever. I don't want to make too fine a point of it, but like him policing your masculinity is a question about him.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
not about his masculinity, just a question about him.
Yeah.
What the fuck does he care?
I would never walk up to a stranger and be like, "Oh, you're drinking out of a shot glass. You're such a man.
Yeah.
Good job, bro."
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I find that people that drink out of a coupe are, maybe even just a little bit more hardcore than the rest of us.
Yeah, also it's just a piece of glassware.
Yeah.
So, my answer to the question, I don't know what the coin is going to say.
The coin's going to say fuck no. So,
is it?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Coin don't lie, so.
My answer is no. Glassware is glassware, and there's like a sort of, I think there's like a subtext to the question, which is like, is certain presentation, it's a question about plating also. In the more traditional food world, is some plating silly? Sure. Is some glassware and some choices about presentation of cocktails ridiculous? Absolutely. I think that a lot of it is ridiculous. It gets back to like the thing we were talking about just a minute ago. Is like it's just a fucking cocktail.
Yeah.
It's like
not saving lives.
You're not saving lives. You're just having a drink.
Yeah.
So some of it is silly, but there are some things that are just like it's part of the tradition, and also there are maybe some mixological arguments that you could make about the effect on flavor of certain shapes of glassware, but in the end, like whatever.
Well, and again, like it does exactly what it is intended to do. I hold it up, I put it to my face, and I can drink from it.
Absolutely.
There is nothing like...
Which is true of the coupe, of the rocks glass that the guy wanted you to put the drink in, but something about the up drink implies to you that it's supposed to be pure, ice cold, and that you're supposed to consume it quickly.
Yeah.
And that's part of the tradition of cocktails. We, understandably, myself included, spend 45 minutes sometimes sipping on a cocktail. But that's not what was actually intended. What was intended is that you're supposed to spend like 7 minutes sipping on a cocktail in like 4
easy
goes.
Yeah.
So like 1 to taste, 2 or 3, one or 2 to sort of like get through the body of the cocktail, and then the last one to savor. And that's supposed to be your experience of a cocktail. It's supposed to be like a 6 to 15 minute experience, and then you go back to work. I mean, that was the sort of the original idea. It wasn't even like then you have another one. Then the idea was like, no, brace yourself, and then you go back to work. So
I mean, the coin says fuck no, so there we go.
There you go. We're not even going to engage in the.
We already know what it says, so.
It's funny. You've cut the Gordian knot in a way. When I was in college, I had a friend. He's still a friend of mine, who had 2. I mean, I guess we could say definitely weed influenced sort of views about the world, which I think are super wise he was 19 years old when he came up with these things. He's now a 50-year-old man. But I think there was a certain kind of wisdom in his 19-year-old self, which is 2 things. 1, if you're bored, make diagrams of things and label them.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what it is. As somebody who went to art school, I think this would probably appeal to you. Yeah, if you're bored, draw diagrams of things and then label them. And you will find that to relieve your boredom and to be an interesting exercise. And if you're trying to figure out the way to go with something, flip a coin. But, and that seems like uninteresting advice on the face of it, but his point at 19 years old was but understand that in assigning heads or tails to things and then making a decision about whether or not you are interested in heads or tails, or in this case, fuck no or fuck yeah, you will, in figuring out which is heads and which is tails, and then deciding which one you are going to go with depending on the outcome of the coin toss, you will have figured out the answer to the question before you even flip the coin.
There you go.
And there you are.
Then we are done. I mean, I'm right there. I think that if you ever just need an important life decision, fuck yeah or fuck no is definitely the way to go. And I think the only worst person in the world is someone who doesn't make a decision. So that is the worst thing that you can ever do. You can always just yes or no, maybe wrong, but at least you made a choice.
You made a choice.
That way, someone who sits in the middle of the road, they're not going to fight for anything.
Squash like grape.
Yeah. So that is it. So there we go. I mean, that is 5 drinks down, 5 questions answered. The coin has told us. David, thank you so much for having us.
That was it.
Pleasure. Come to Quarter Bar.
Right on.
And until we can do this again in person.
Sure. I hope to see you. And whoever else wants to come with you.